we often have these gifts that are dormant, and we have to actually, so as a medium, the voice that I hear, I call spirit, and spirit uses the word consent a lot. So we have to consent to basically looking beyond the veil, right? And I use this very oversimplified way of describing this. It's not actually this way, obviously, but I think of the material world as a circle here, and the spiritual world is right here, and it butts up to it. And we may have psychic abilities, which I believe are actually extremely common. And if we don't pull that thread and we don't follow our curiosity, then we stay firmly footed in the material world.
Sunshine Grace is a spiritual medium, compelling speaker, and mental wellness advocate whose awakening began through ayahuasca and led to profound psychic gifts. With a background in research psychology, she channels spirit to share messages of healing, hope, and conscious awakening. A veteran, mother, and filmmaker, Sunshine is devoted to amplifying marginalized voices and promoting peace through her work. Welcome to the show, Sunshine.
Thanks, Rhonda. So great to be here.
It is wonderful to be in your presence. I'm so intrigued about your journey, and I'm just wondering, like, you have a lot of what a person would call telepathic skills. And I'm wondering if how long you've known that you've had these. Did they develop over time? And are you still developing them?
Rhonda, that is such a great question. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me today. I was really looking forward to meeting you in person in the virtual realm. And thanks for this opportunity to be with you.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is all mine.
Oh, well, I'm sure we're going to have fun in the next hour.
Oh, we sure will.
Because that's important to both of us, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, it's such a great topic. And since the telepathy tapes were released 4 months ago, to me, it feels like that just ripped the whole hood off of this whole, I won't say paradox, but the exploration between materialism and the spiritual. And I guess I'll take your questions in order. Have I always had them? Yes. Did I always know? I think it's kind of the cliche answer that a lot of people give. They just thought everybody did these things. And also, I didn't identify with them as I got older.
Mm.
And then I spent, 15 years or so as an atheist. So I was a very, very steeped in the philosophical materialism paradigm. Although I would joke with my friends and say I'm the most spiritual atheist you'll ever meet, because I always knew as a teenager, like when friends were thinking of me and when they were going to call. So I had this understanding that things were interconnected in the universe in a way that I couldn't explain. And I went from birth until 46, having these kind of one-off experiences. I take that back. I got to back up. 46 was 3 years ago. I'm about to turn 49. Because 46 is when my spiritual awakening started in a fastened pace. But a few years before that, I had a precognition dream about a multi-car accident on the freeway that runs through downtown. And those precognition dreams are so vivid and they feel so real, right? They have a different energy about them than a normal dream. And a few days later, I was the first responder on the scene of the accident.
Mm.
And gratefully, because I have some EMT training in my background in a prior life, I was able to respond quickly and get 911 and all the other responders there and prevent what ended up being a 3-car accident from turning into a multi-car accident, because it was on a hill on the freeway at nighttime where there was no lighting and there was a big divider. And as I crested this hill, I could see two cars that were blocking 3 lanes. And I jerked my wheel over to the right, brought my car to a very quick halt, threw on my hazards, started laying on the horn because I could see in the rear view mirror this wave of traffic behind me about a mile away that couldn't see the accident because they were downhill of it. And I got out of my vehicle actually to run to the second vehicle because I couldn't see the person. And I knew he needed probably to be C-spined. The driver of the first vehicle was a woman and she was in shock. I could tell by her behavior. She was on the phone, pacing the medium, the cement barrier between the two different directions of the freeway. And I took about a step or two out of my vehicle that was parked off the side of the road when a huge black truck sped by me and its side view mirror nearly ripping my arm off. I never saw this vehicle in my dream, and I never saw it in my quick glance in my mirror because it was black. And I thought, okay, plan B. I hop back in my vehicle and call 911, and this truck proceeds to never hit his brakes and slam into that second vehicle where there's a driver still in it, going about 70 miles an hour. And so, yeah, the woman survived barely. The driver of the second vehicle had a lot of injuries but survived. And I found out that the driver of the black truck was asleep at the wheel from DUI. And it took me a while to process the spiritual, like the significance of that experience, because it was very clear to me that my interruption in that scene, all that prevented all those other cars from piling on and saved the woman's life, because she was in the middle of the freeway on the phone in shock, and a semi was piling down in front of her and had nowhere to go. So I, paused my conversation with the dispatcher and called to her in a very aggressive way because I needed to snap her out of her shock. And she looked at me and ran in her pretty slacks and her heels and blouse across the freeway. And as she did that, that semi came scraping up that medium, sparks flying, and slammed into her vehicle, right? So I know I saved at least her life and maybe many others. That was pretty obvious, but I didn't understand how I could know that, how I could have that dream. It's essentially seeing the future, right? And so I didn't have any place in my reality for understanding precognition, even though I had had it my entire life, but never pulled the thread. And I decided to pull a thread. So I bought a book on psychic abilities, and it was written by a person who could explain it very scientifically, which my master's is in research. I have a strong left analytical brain. And I thought, oh, okay. And with the foundation of quantum physics and always learning about physics, it made sense to me. And I remember calling my brother, who I'm very close to. He's 14 months older. And I said to him, brother, do you ever have dreams about the future? And he said something that I didn't understand the significance of it then, but would later. He said, I do, but I try not to think about them. So what that tells me now, 5 years later, is that we often have these gifts that are dormant, and we have to actually, so as a medium, the voice that I hear, I call spirit, and spirit uses the word consent a lot. So we have to consent to basically looking beyond the veil, right? And I use this very oversimplified way of describing this. It's not actually this way, obviously, but I think of the material world as a circle here, and the spiritual world is right here, and it butts up to it. And we may have psychic abilities, which I believe are actually extremely common. And if we don't pull that thread and we don't follow our curiosity, then we stay firmly footed in the material world for many lives, maybe. But when we start to pull that thread, it starts to move us towards the middle between the worlds. And if we keep pulling it, then we can end up being basically a medium living between the two worlds. And so I would attribute my curiosity to getting me to where I am now, which of course is always growing and learning about these gifts that I consider divine grace, but also earned by the soul. They're both given. In conversations with spirit, I've asked this question many times, like, why me? Why do I get clairaudience, clairvoyance, precognition, telepathy, teaching dreams, clear gnosis? I mean, I really struggled with that for a long time. I think there was some self-worth healing that needed to be done for a while. And the last time I had this conversation with Spirit basically said, something that they actually did say on the telepathy tapes. I'll reference that again. And for those who don't know what the telepathy tapes are, they're a podcast that was published 4 months ago that pretty much overnight became the most popular podcast on the planet about children on the spectrum with autism who have psychic abilities. And I love this podcast. Season 1 is 10 episodes, and season 2 is getting ready to be published because the story is told not from a scientific perspective, but from the heart. And these children with autistic gifts, one of them said to his mom when he was a nonverbal autistic child, and when he started to be able to speak through the speller, if I remember my story accurately, the board where the children can push the numbers and letters and spell, he told her, Mom, I can read your mind. And she said, excuse my language. And he said something that really resonates with me. You don't get these gifts by lying. And how I interpret that is I do believe in reincarnation, as you do, Rhonda. And as our souls are taking incarnations and also learning without bodies, because we can learn in the realms in between, we earn the trust of the universe to use these gifts in a responsible way, which is to be of service. And there's a very big weight of responsibility that comes with these gifts, in my opinion, because if we are not very aware of our egos, we can really cause harm with these gifts. And if we actually consciously or unconsciously choose the path of having power over others, which is a very real temptation of the ego always wants to stand out and be separate, right? And the soul always wants merge and union with the divine. So they want two different things. So as we're awakening and we have these gifts, so much of the conversation of psychic abilities for me is ethics. And I believe that we awaken in a body to the nature of reality. We can call it unity, as we can handle it ethically. That's my belief.
Well, it's a lot to digest, but I love it. I love the subject matter. I love what you're talking about. I want to go deeper with that. I think that dreams are very important, especially if we write them down in the morning before we get out of bed, because they can be lost in the fabric of time, right? But when dreams come true, that is a very special thing. Gary Lockman has a book called Dreaming Ahead of Time. And that's exactly, I mean, that's how what sells books is telling people what that means. So you're dreaming in the nighttime, and as you explained, and then it happened. And it may not happen exactly the way it did in the dream, especially if you have this insight into what's happening. You can plan when the event unfolds what you may be able to assist or help or minimize lives being lost, right? And so I'm very fascinated by that. I myself have had dreams that have come true. And most notably, dreamt prior to my son's birth that I had a little boy, blonde hair, blue eyed baby boy. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter, I dreamt 3 or 4 times that I had a dark haired, dark eyed baby girl, and I had her as well. And I think that a lot of women who when they are pregnant, may have these dreams, but not really give a lot of credence to it. But I think that if you get these types of dreams and you draw the connection, that more dreams come. And I think that's the same with telepathy or any of the gifts that are available to everyone, I believe, that the more you use them, the more you use them to help others with, the more they come. Can you speak on that? The more they
Mhm.
come into your present day awareness. Can you speak on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, Rhonda, sorry, I'm still smiling about the comment you shared about seeing your son and daughter, and I think it's precious, and I think of that, but I'd love to know if you agree of that as you're receptive you're receptive to your children before they're in body,
Yeah,
and that they're telling you through
they're
their
telling.
dreams, it's their soul telling you. Yeah. Do you see it that way?
Russell Targ, actually, I interviewed Russell Targ, and he said to me, because when my first child was born, my son, I was in a hospital and he was laying in the bassinet, and I was looking out the window. And the last thing I wanted to do was to have another child. I had just given birth. However, what came to me was that I was going to have a different baby in a different city. And it scared me at the time because I didn't, that was the end of my child birthing at that point. But that's exactly what happened. And so Russell Targ said that was it my future child bringing me the message to let me know that she was on her way?
Mhm.
So that was the first time that ever I saw the reverse of that.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Hmm.
Super cool.
So I think for women, I think that this is a very special thing to talk about because lots of times when we're pregnant, we keep our feelings to ourselves because we're having a relationship with the unborn child.
Yes.
And we don't really realize that until the unborn child is born, and then we miss that connection. And I
Oh,
think it's wonderful that women know about these special occurrences that could take place while they're pregnant, right?
yeah. I think a lot of women do, especially, yeah, like I have a friend who had her first daughter last year, and her daughter sent her pictures in her dreams of her wearing pink bows. And this is totally this child's personality. She's a little princess, like, I
Yes.
mean, flowers, I think it's actually, Rhonda, I think part of my mission is becoming somebody who speaks publicly and openly about the spirituality in general,
Mhm.
is honoring that so much of these conversations and ways of knowing things and feeling connection have been stigmatized. But I'm actually choosing not to focus on that area. I'm actually choosing to focus on how prevalent everything is, right? To change the norm in that way. It's like advocating top down instead of bottom up.
Yeah.
Totally, both are valid ways. One is more activism, and one is more like highlighting the world that we want to live in.
Mhm.
And I actually think it's probably really common for women to have telepathic communication with their children. I think it's actually common for people of all genders to have telepathic conversations and to be connected to what I think of as the unified field. That's what I just to kind of put a little framework around this topic. When I started waking up 3 years ago, which started in my first ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica in June of 2022. I was an atheist at the time, and one day I was an atheist, and the next day I was hearing the voice of God, basically. So, as you can imagine, it was quite disorienting. But over the last 3 years, I mean, I don't really ask this anymore, but over the last 3 years, I've asked spirit, the voice that I hear, so many questions. One time spirit said, "You have a lot of questions." I said, "I do." And one of those questions was, what is this voice? I mean, I had to unlearn everything I'd been taught about materialism and start from the beginning. And it's interesting because it took 2 years for spirit would give me an answer at the level that I was ready to receive it at. So at first, the voice that I channel, spirit, came through as the shaman down in Costa Rica. That's as much as my psyche could really handle. Like, if I'm sure looking back, if I went from being an atheist to hearing the voice of the divine the next day, it would just be too much ontological shock, and I would not have been able to function. It was already difficult for me. But then I would ask, like one time I said, I was actually in ayahuasca ceremony, and I asked, and this is coming back to, I guess I'm sharing this as a way to broaden our topic a little more from mother-child connection to psychic abilities in general. I was using the bathroom outside of the hut that you serve the medicine in, which is called a maloka, and it's served by these shamans who spend their lives working with this medicine. And they are trained as much as a physician in America and a priest together, right? I mean, it's decades. It's their entire life path, right? So I have a lot of respect for these what they're called curanderos or shamans. And I take a break. I go to the restroom. I'm going to be, might be a little awkward sharing this, but I'm literally sitting on the toilet going pee. And the force of the medicine is very strong in me. It's kind of peaking. And it can be ungrounding when you first start working with psychedelics, right? To know how to kind of move through that. And there was a candle on the floor, and it was this tiny little bathroom with a commode and a sink and this candle on this floor. And all of a sudden, this pattern goes up the walls, and it's this beautiful neon pink and purple geometric shapes. These patterns are actually known very well in the Amazon. They're called Kene, Kene. And they are representative of the universe, basically spirit. And the voice of ayahuasca, which I think of as the divine, said, "I am always here. You just don't always see me." So I'm taking this in because I'm like, okay, the voice that I communicate is always here. I just don't always see you. Okay, that makes sense. It's invisible. It's energy, not matter. Okay, I understand that. And then all of a sudden, in the corner by that candle, I see there are like a bunch of little pill bugs, the roly-poly kind, and they're doing their thing around this candle because they're attracted to the light. But then the grandpa starts walking towards me. And he's walking towards me like, do, 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 coming over to say hi. And I'm like, whoa, boundaries, because the medicine is so strong, and insects I'm not super comfortable with them. And I said to him, "Grandpa, can you give me some space?" And he's like, doo, 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 and he keeps passing this boundary. And I'm like, oh, sunshine, breathe, breathe, breathe and ground. And I open my eyes, and all of a sudden, over this pill bug is this pink and purple iridescent field. And I'm allowed to sense into what this field is. And I went, oh my God, it's the same intelligence as the voice I communicate with. So that was spirit showing me, kind of bringing me up the next level. Like, everything in matter is made of me, right? So slowly I would start to adjust, and then months went by. And I said one night, "Tell me again what you are." And I go to sleep, and in my dreams, I get, "Conscience is not here. conscience is not there. Conscience is everywhere. And then the last teaching that nailed it for me, and kind of moved me into a space of understanding how I understand consciousness and the unified field of intelligence that we all tap into. You know, Carl Jung spent a lot of time doing work around this. Is I said to Spirit, what what if you're not really God and you're like an angel or a delegate? Because I really, like, my ego wants to think, oh yeah, I'm actually talking to God, right? Like that's pretty cool. But more than I want that security, I need to know the truth. So if you're a delegate, some archangel or something, a Greek goddess, let me know. And I go to sleep, and in my dreams that night, Spirit said, Spirit is in everything. And that was so that when we're talking about these psychic abilities and connecting to some intelligence, whether it's in our dreams as precognition or telepathy, that conversation is framed in dualistic terms, us and something we're communicating to, right? Outside of the six senses. But really what I think of this all is the entire universe, which was unborn and undying and doesn't have a beginning or an end, and is timeless. All matter is really this consciousness, and an incarnated life is an invitation to not only learn and evolve as a soul, but if we're lucky enough, like in my life, in this life, and I'm sure you would agree, we get to wake up to the degree where we start to communicate with the unified field of consciousness and with other ways of knowing things.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Anna?
Beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. What a great explanation and examples so that people can grasp what you're talking about and resonate where you are.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about past lives, there's a huge curiosity for myself and many about past lives. So, what indication would a person have if they knew that they had lived before? And if they lived before, if their spirit or soul had many lives, how would they know if they actually did or not? Like, what sort of inclinations would come to them? Would it come in a dream? Would it come in sort of just sensing
Yeah.
their reality that is right now, but in a higher sense?
Rhonda, I think I'm hearing actually two questions in your question, because I think the first answer is it really just depends on how we receive information. So that's maybe the practical side of the answer. But there's this other side of us, maybe the mind, that always needs validation. Like, let's say we have a dream of a past life and it feels really real. And maybe in our bodies, like if we put our awareness on our gut and we ask the question to our gut, or we ask the question to our heart, we might get very different answers than the confusion and noise that's in our head, right? So that's one way I think of making decisions. And I think it's actually a direct connection to our soul, right? And our intuition, which is kind of the same thing. But even being a highly intuitive person, I often need validation myself. And uh, and I don't know what the answer is. I know for me, I had a dream years ago when I was an atheist, a very vivid dream of me actually as a German soldier in Nazi World War II who was being killed in a firing line for betraying not my orders. And the dream was so real and so vivid. And the moment my hands were shackled and my ankles were shackled, and there were four other men also in line, and we each had a soldier in front of us, a German soldier, and they were pointing a gun towards us. So five of us, five of them. And it was broad daylight. I remember the color of the dirt, and they spoke in German, and so they said 3, 2, 1, and at 3 we all dropped to the ground, and 2, and then at 1, right before the soldier in front of me pulled the trigger in this dream, I remember just very clearly thinking, he doesn't understand. I'm choosing to forgive him because it it was too much for him to push back. And he was worried, I'm sure, about his family and the safety of his loved ones. And I have compassion and empathy for him, and I forgive him. And then on 1, they pulled the trigger, and the bullet actually went straight through my third eye. And before, like, or as it was entering, my soul left my body and turned around and looked at the body that fall to the ground. And for years, this is 20 years ago, I didn't even know what to make of it, other than the fact that it felt really real. I wasn't even open to past lives. But during my journey in the last 3 years, this became a conversation between spirit and I. And here's what I've learned. Spirit actually recently told me that through a couple different dreams and channeled conversations, that I was actually a Nazi German soldier who was Jewish by blood. And the reason why I was killed is because I was given access to the perimeter of a concentration camp. And I'm so sorry for those who this may be really sensitive to. Please take a minute to mute if this is too much to hear. So just want to honor the sensitivity of this topic. But I guess in that life, which I think is the life before this life, when other soldiers weren't looking, I would lift up the side of the fence and let the Jewish people outside of the concentration camp go. And I got caught. And I knew I was putting my family at risk and my own life. And I still made that choice. And Spirit told me, and this is something I want to highlight in this conversation with you for listeners, something that I've learned recently that is, I don't think that something is taught a lot or highlighted, or maybe not taught enough or talked about enough. But assuming reincarnation is real, the way our soul evolves is by making the right decisions. It's actually by ethical choices. And Spirit told me recently, so I think that choice to forgive him the moment before I died is what allowed me to receive these gifts in this lifetime. In fact, when I asked Spirit, like, why am I given so much grace? It means so much to me to be able to help people with these gifts. Spirit basically said, you earned it. And then said, and it's also a promotion. Now, that doesn't mean what we think it means when you hear it. It means there's grace. This isn't all these gifts aren't fully on merit alone, sunshine. This is the universe going, hey, here's this ambitious soul over here who really wants to help people. She may have made a lot of harmful mistakes in the past and hurt a lot of people in prior lives, but we're going to give her a little more to see what she does with it. And so we're going to give her an unmerited gift and see if she can handle it, basically if her ego can handle it. So it's both earning it by choosing the hard decisions and doing the right thing, and also grace. It's both. And this grace is redemptive. It heals us. And the last thing I'll say is Spirit showed me that in that life, in my prior life when I was that soldier, I was a meditator, which is interesting. I would go into prayer as a Jewish person and sit in prayer long enough to flip the energy from pushing up the prayer, which is, I think, of a masculine energy. It's pushing messages out, pushing thoughts out, to that quiet stillness, which is the feminine energy of receiving messages. right? Because if you sit in prayer long enough and you're not creating thought, then you're receiving. And to me, that's where prayer becomes meditation. And apparently, I meditated a lot in that lifetime. And in that lifetime, I got to see my past lives in my meditations. And Spirit said to me, in this lifetime, you will, whether it's meditation or dreaming, I don't know, remember your past lives in time.
Beautiful.
Do you have memories of past lives, Rhonda?
Pardon?
Do you have memories of past lives?
I've had dreams where I questioned whether that was a past life. I've had inklings. And I think that the more you resonate with spirit, I think that these types of feelings come to you, these dreams come to you, and this confirmation comes to you. And it's like this podcast that I have. I had to start this podcast. There was no question about it. I'm like, why am I doing this? And it didn't matter why I was doing it. I had to do it. And I think that when we follow and when we listen, pay attention and follow, and we can question. I love that you're questioning. And I think that people should question. We should question it. But when you get a firm yes or a firm directive or a no, sort of like a parent would give you, then I think your gift is to follow that. And regardless of the outcome, because we're outcome motivated. We want to know if I do this, then what? And when we really give up trying to control tomorrow, a decade from now, and we just be here right now, we can't ask for a better gift, right? We
Mhm.
can't ask for a better gift. And so I thank you for asking me that. I haven't really thought a whole lot about it, maybe skirted around it a little bit. But my next question has to do with,
Can I interrupt you? I'm so curious. I have two things that I'd love to ask you about.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Yeah. And thank you for being flexible in this interview because you may be curious of others and be learning a lot from your interviews, but I'm also curious about you. Some interviews I can talk all interview, but this interview, I'm like, I want to know about Rhonda. So you used the word directive,
Mhm.
and that word stands out to me because I guess to me, and you let me know how this resonates with you. It kind of infringes or butts up against my sense of sovereignty when I think of being directed to do something. In fact, I probably would get a little pushy
Yeah.
if I felt like something was directing me to do something. Um, and when I started hearing a voice 3 years ago, my relationship to the voice was, if this was me and this was the voice, I was the grandchild and the voice was a harsh grandparent. It did feel directive. And when we feel like we're directed to do something, if we don't understand why, then it can feel scary. And that uncertainty can be a breach of our sovereignty. And so I often did things anyway back then out of respect for something greater because I knew that the voice I was communicating with knew all of my thoughts and I knew it was intelligent. And I also knew that it was loving because I experienced something called the love experience where you're given so much love. I think you might have experienced this in your NDE, right? You're given so much love that it's a reset and it makes us have to reevaluate just how benevolent we think the universe is, right? So I would follow these directives in my early years with spirit because I was so respectful of it, but it would actually cause me harm. And so as I started to heal a lot of trauma and awaken and push back when I didn't feel like I wanted to take that directive. You know what spirit would do? Show me a little bird's nest and a little bird fledging from the nest and say, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're all pushy and directive, but then when I push back, you congratulate me? I'm confused. So this began a long process that would take 2 years and maybe more of me understanding that what spirit was doing, among other things, like healing and awakening me, was reflecting to me how I saw the universe. I saw myself as a child and others powerful. Part of that came from my own sexual abuse as a child, not having been supported or advocated for as a child to say, this doesn't feel good. Back off. That wasn't safe to say as a child. So you learn to just shut up and do what you're told, which is horrible. And I am sorry to anybody, no matter what gender, if you've been sexually abused for that. It is horrible. Over time, I started getting more sovereign and more sovereign. And the way it showed up was through my voice. I would speak, I would yell at spirit. And you know what? I would not get punished. The more I got in my power, the gap between us started reducing. Then I was a teenager, and this was a parent who might be a helicopter parent, but not a directive grandparent, right? And not harsh. And slowly, slowly it started changing. And then one day in a channeling session with spirit, spirit said to me something that started a very profound shift with the way I relate to life. And that was, you are still relating to me through fear. I am your equal. Mm-hmm. What? This divine intelligence that can gift me this love experience, and I are equals? Now, many people already know this. Many people understand that God can be a reflection of our own ways to heal. Okay. And in no way am I saying that your choice of the word directive implies all of this, because that might be how you relate or how you receive the information, right? Like maybe you wait for it to be a strong yes, and then that's when you know. When I started asking spirit, how do I know the difference between trusting you versus trusting me? And in those early days, because I had so much trauma that had been unhealed, I wasn't living in my body, which is a huge disadvantage in life. And so for any listeners who have not began your healing journey in this life, which means hopefully gently taking a look at all of your trauma in a slow, gentle, loving, compassionate way, and slowly, gently healing from it and feeling those feelings. As we do that, we get more into our bodies. And our bodies actually are the compass for our sovereignty and choices, right? And you talk about aligning to your cells, feeling your cells and communicating with your cells, which, by the way, cells have free will. And when we're connected to our cells, we can align ourselves like an army, right? And we can attune to them saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So all this to say, when we're not in our bodies because our soul has left our body because it's too difficult to live down there. In South American culture, they call it susto, which is a great scare or a shock, right? This is an NDE experiences. The soul leaves the body to protect us from the pain, from the experience. And they even call it soul loss in shamanism. It's when part of our soul fractures off and stays back in the past with that traumatic event. Well, if that happens too many times, there's not much energy left in the body. So we don't live there. We don't habitate it. But as we start to heal our trauma, we start to get more comfortable in our bodies in the present moment. We feel safer and safer. And then we can use our body. And here's what Spirit taught me about using my body to make sovereign decisions. Spirit said, I was in the middle of my, what I call a shamanic illness. So the first 2 years of my awakening, year and 9 months, were, I was in crisis state. I was literally like physically in crisis state and mentally and psychologically. I went through a huge burning off. And it felt like I was on my knees in mercy. And I've never shared this on a grand scale, and I won't share the details today. One day I'll be comfortable enough to share it, but I only can liken that shamanic illness to feeling like I'd been in a car accident, broken every bone in my body, couldn't get out of bed, and had to learn to walk again. Okay. So in that state, I would spend a lot of time not being able to get out of bed, crying on my couch. And one day I was crying, and Spirit said, "Do you feel like you're off your life path?" And drew a line like this and drew a little square off the line. And I'm sobbing, and I'm like, yes, 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 none of this feels aligned. This is horrible. Life is horrible. And Spirit said, I know. And then Spirit said, do you see there is no off the path? And there was something deep in my gut that resonated as true when I heard those words, although I didn't understand it yet conceptually in my body. And as the conversation went on, I said to Spirit, I need a tool for knowing when to trust you versus trust me, because I know that you're putting me through these tests to strengthen me. That's what shamanic illness does. It takes somebody who's strong and makes them extremely super strong. But I need a practical tool. And Spirit said, okay, if I ask you a question and the answer is yes, place your awareness on your head and ask yourself that question and see how a yes feels in the head. So Spirit asked me a question, and I don't remember what it was. We'll just say, is the sky blue? And I placed my awareness on my head, and I said, okay, what does a yes feel like in the head? It feels disconnected, but I guess reliable. And then Spirit said, great, now place your awareness on your heart. How does a yes feel in your heart? Okay, is the sky blue? Shine my flashlight of awareness to my heart. Oh, a yes feels like a rose blossoming. Beautiful. Great. How does a yes feel in your gut? Okay. Shine my awareness, my flashlight to my gut. Put my hands on my belly. Is the sky blue? Wow. A yes feels like a rope pulling my gut, pulling it towards it. And when we went through the same process with a no was disconnected in the head. In the heart, it was, oh, the rose is closing up. Mm-hmm. And in the gut, it was like a knot, like, nope, not happening. So that's one superpower that as we start to habitate our bodies again, that's one way we begin to make decisions. And even though I'm 3 years into this, and I've been blessed up so much, Rhonda, I mean, the gifts that I have, the clairs that I have, are a manifestation of the bigger gift inside of me. The bigger gift inside of me is peace, joy, and trust of life. That the dynamic now for me feels like I keep saying yes to things, but I'm saying yes to them not because they are a directive anymore. I'm saying yes to them because my head doesn't understand them, but my gut and my heart are pulling me to them. And that is the soul.
Mm-hmm. And that is the soul.
That's the soul. It's in the body.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that was giving me the direction.
Yeah, your body.
Yeah, my body.
I'm I'm so glad you say
Yes.
that because now I
Yeah.
know we speak the same language. We're just using different words. But I
Yeah.
didn't bypass that topic because for listeners who are becoming more embodied, I want
Yes.
to reinforce that the answers are in our bodies.
They're in our body.
Yes.
And that feels really good. And we get indications in our lives about, when we're about to do something and we get a feeling of we shouldn't do it and we go ahead and do it anyway. And then that's the answer in that. And if we can keep track of that, we'll realize that we need to give a lot of credence to those intuitions, those insights that we have and listen. And whether it's not to do something or if it is to do something, like for me, it was the inspiration to create this podcast,
Yeah.
right? And it was something that I could do. It's something that I knew how to do
Oh,
because I'd already, I have Courting Your Soul podcast, and I've been the curator and host of that podcast for, I think, 2.5 years.
wow.
So, because I know how to do things, I'm asked to do more, and I'm okay with that. And
Hmm.
I think you are too, is
Hmm.
because when you know that you're on the right path,
Hmm.
you can't get to things quick enough, really. That you,
You're right. It's the satisfaction of knowing that you're living your soul's best life. And it's very nourishing.
it sure is. Now, you
Mhm.
talked about channeling, and I know that the audience members are going to, the listeners are going to wonder. They hear a lot about channeling. They've heard channelers on different podcasts if they do listen and watch podcasts. Can you let the listeners know a little bit more about what it's like to channel, what the feeling in the body is like, and where does the messages come from?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. Well, I'll take the last question first. For me, so everybody who channels, I think, has a different answer for this, but because I started
Yes.
from zero as an atheist and had to unlearn everything and then rebuild and discover Buddhism and unity and all that. And because of all those questions with spirit, what am I communicating with? Um, the voice that I channel is spirit. It's the unified field of intelligence. Um, what it feels like is in the body. Well, first I'll say energetically, it feels like talking to a friend. Um, it wasn't always that way in my awakening because I come through ayahuasca, which has its own lineage, but actually isn't different than Christian mysticism or um, Taoism or any of these other lineages. Many profound awakenings enter through suffering and through a series of tests and trials. Even Jesus talked about this in the Bible, and Moses talked about it, right? In the Old Testament. So this phase of tests and trials is a sign of a very strong awakening, I think. So I'm out of the woods, the hardest part in my evolution of awakening. I still, the universe is always challenging me, but it doesn't feel heavy anymore, like tests. It feels like, what do I want to learn? What do I want to focus on right now? Um, but that voice has always been spirit. And I do think of it as the unified field. And so I've worked really hard at my own healing, mostly healing a lot of trauma and also moral development to to get really feel like an equal with spirit. Like, and I say that in the sense that not like I'm a god. I say that in the sense of we get each other and Now it's like a friend-friend relationship. You know, spirit, even when I'm channeling, I write everything down on my phone, and spirit will now, whereas 3 years ago, the conversations were a lot of spirit pushing my boundaries to teach me how to say back off, how to unlearn from the sexual trauma as a child, right? So I had a lot of boundary teaching early on, a lot, like 2 years of boundary teachings. I think, I don't think we ever graduate from boundary teaching because we're always having to set boundaries in our life to protect our energy. But recently, Spirit said, your boundaries are great. You finally got that down. It took 2 years. So now my dynamic is more, just a friend, like sitting on a couch with your fuzzy socks and a cup of tea and having a conversation, although the friend happens to be the infinite intelligence of the universe. So you can literally ask any question. That being said, in my body, it depends, the experience depends on how I connect. So I actually connect 3 ways. The first two are similar. The third is different. The first two are similar because they both come from top information coming down to me. And so I'm more of a passive recipient of knowledge, wisdom, insight. It may be existential in nature, it may be personal in nature. It might be blind spots, maybe how I'm blocking my heart, maybe how I'm judging someone, maybe something, totally huge, right? The nature of reality. But those 2 ways, the first is my teaching dreams. So I'm blessed with teaching dreams, and teaching dreams are where I get taught in my dreams. And these have happened almost every night for 3 years. It's a lot of learning. It's not uncommon to have 2 or 3 a night. If I go a couple days without a dream, I'm like, thank God for the break. That is, again, it's more passive. It's I'm the student and just kind of watching and learning, right? The second way is also passive. And so I try to meditate an hour most days, sometimes only 30 minutes. But in my meditations, about 50% of the time, I get communication. Well, I would say more than that. Now it's almost every time I meditate, I get communication. And the communication is usually typical ways that mediums get information, or that all of us rather get information, which is impressions, which are emojis, sometimes emojis, because Spirit and I use a lot of emojis, images, other types of images, and a lot of spoken word. So I'm hearing the presence of the intelligent field in my head very clear. And actually, right now, I'm in a kind of expansion. That sounds very pretentious, but I'll say it anyway. This expansion stage where I'm getting so much information in meditation that I'm being invited to learn how to just let it all go and just keep witnessing it, right? And learn what to pick up and work and what to let go of. So meditation is the second way. The third way I get connection is actually the richest, believe it or not, and it's through psychedelic work. My psychedelic work began years ago with mushrooms, then shifted into ayahuasca, but I'm so sensitive now that I use cannabis spiritually about 8 times a year. And I won't say where I do that because I don't want to incriminate myself. Cannabis is illegal in Texas. I'm not necessarily doing it in the state of Texas, but about 8 times a year, I'll take a very small dose because I'm so sensitive. I'm talking like 5 to 7 micrograms, I think is the measurement. And that is, when that happens, it's a sacred event for me. I'm not a very ceremonial type of person or into bhakti yoga and devotion, but it is a sacred experience to me. Once I take the medicine, about 40 minutes later, the onset will happen. And by then, I'm on my couch with my cell phone, and pressure will build in my body as spirit is kind of knocking on a hatch above me that goes to heaven. And I can say no, I can pass it up, but I only get so many times to pass it up, and then that opportunity will close. So that window stays open for 3 to 4 hours max. When I open that hatch, the dialogue starts like you and I talking, and I write everything down. And again, we use a lot of emojis. And so I've kind of developed a whole language with spirit around emojis. And how it feels is interesting. So I think like the word trance is used a lot, but I don't like that word because one, it doesn't feel how it doesn't explain how I actually feel. Because I'm not, it's not that I'm not sovereign. Like because of my past with trauma with sexual abuse, it's really important for me to always feel in control. Okay. So that channeling is is a lovely way to connect because spirit teaches me in 4 categories. Spirit's teachings rather fall into 4 categories. And we have been communicating like this for 3 years. And luckily, Rhonda, I have written everything down. So I have probably 30 conversations of 3 to 4 hours of getting taught. And the 4 categories of spirit's teachings, from the micro to the macro, are meditation techniques, personal teachings, interpersonal teachings, and existential teachings. And just to briefly define them, meditation techniques are tips for staying in the present moment while we're safe in our bodies. Personal teachings are always about self-love and self-respect and always include ethics. Interpersonal teachings are about how to be loving in relationship and still speak our truth. And existential teachings are my favorite because that's where I get all asked, wait, what happened before the Big Bang again? And what happens when we die? Tell me the story again, Spirit. And those conversations, when I connect that way, last for 3 to 4 hours. I write everything down. And I try to go to sleep by 11 o'clock because I'm really big on self-care. Recently, however, and I will say one more thing. There are times when I'm channeling, when I'm writing, when I'm in witness mode. It's flowing so easily that I'm not processing what I'm writing. And I'll give you an example because that shamanic illness was so hard on my body, and because I've had to learn to take extremely, like I've always been healthy, good eater, good exerciser, not great sleeper. So I've had to learn to really anchor in a structured routine in my day, which really grounds me, and prioritize adequate sleep. That's where I was deficient before. Now I'm very structured this way and very disciplined. And one time recently I was channeling and I wrote capital P period, and then the toilet emoji. And I wasn't aware of what I was writing. And when I wrote that, then I kind of popped out of that witness place. And I thought, what does this mean? Oh, pee-pee. The spirit was saying, go to the bathroom and go to sleep. It's your bedtime. Spirit has a huge sense of humor and uses a lot of play on words and puns. And most Spirit's puns are around duality versus unity.
Yeah.
So if you understand the non-dual perspective, you'll get Spirit's humor. And Spirit communicates in poems a lot. Sometimes words I don't know, I write them down anyway and then Google them later and understand what they mean. And the poetry is really beautiful. It's, to me, somebody getting a poem from spirit is like one of the most precious things in life, because there's an intonation that's very gentle to spirit speaking. And you'll hear it when I read the poetry. And the emojis often have dual meanings, and it's just so pure and beautiful. And 2 months ago, so this has been a personal, private experience for 3 years. And 2 months ago, I kind of stumbled upon the realization, or that I've been gifted with the kind of mediumship that can channel with the departed. So that's a big deal. I actually published a YouTube video on my channel last night. I think it's 16 minutes, catching my YouTube audience up to speed on what has happened in my life the last 2 months, how this has come about, the gratitude I feel, and being given this type of mediumship. And I've done 2 sessions in the last several weeks, both very different sessions. One was very easy. It was a mother who died suddenly of a brutal form of cancer. And she was very close to her daughter. So I got to channel for her daughter. And the mother was pouring all this love into her daughter. And that was easy. And then 2 weeks ago, I channeled for a friend here in Austin whose fiance took his own life 3 years ago. And when he was still here in his body, their relationship was very challenging, because he was like a spastic fairy artist type, and she was a grounded project manager engineer type. And so their relationship was challenging because their communication styles and the way their brains work and process information is very different. So I channeled for them, and that was on the other end of the spectrum. It wasn't just all this love being poured. I was like, when I discovered that when I'm channeling for a departed, it's nothing like channeling with spirit, because spirit, it just flows. When I'm channeling for the departed, I'm literally in between the two people. It's nothing like having a conversation with two people in the 3D. When you're in between two people, it means you're in their relationship, and you feel all of the dynamics of their relationship. So she had a lot of anger towards him for taking his life. And I basically found myself in this position, and I'm not a licensed therapist, playing the role of kind of marriage and family therapist, because he's speaking from this higher realm where he sees things that, and sees a perspective, a higher perspective of the importance of letting go of anger, of cherishing our precious lives. And she's like, yo, I got pissed at you. You know? So it was an interesting experience. And I'll just say, I realize that this gift I have is so precious, Rhonda. And there's so many people who feel like a part of themselves left when somebody they love died. And having healed from all that myself and being able to communicate to the other side, I'm inspired to do this more, to more of this work. So if people who are listening to this are interested in me channeling for you, you can go to my website at bettingon.love and go up to the menu, and it says schedule a live channeling session. And you can read all the stuff and watch the video and put your information in the contact form. And I will say I'm selective about who I work with. I try to really work with people who understand the sacredness of this work, but also the fun and levity of it, because the other side is really funny. And my recommended donation amount there is on my website. I recommend $200 donation. And that actually is a steal because it is extremely taxing work on the medium's part, on their body. It takes me 24 hours to recover. But what you
Yes.
get for that session is it's not just an hour reading. Like if I were channeling for you, Rhonda, which you have tons of gifts, I'm sure you don't really need support in that area. But if I were channeling for you, say a grandfather who passed away, it's not what I'm finding is that my style is unique from other mediums because a lot of mediums, they do amazing, there are amazing mediums out there. Teresa Capo, Tyler Henry, John Edwards, these people have fine-tuned their crafts. But what I think I pride myself on is it's my style isn't one direction. It's not just information from top down. The person in here is actually giving information up. So if it's a dialogue through me. It's
Right.
literally, and the sessions are 2 to 2.5 hours. So you over Zoom, so you get a lot of information conveyed and shared and understood, and a lot of clarity in that dialogue. And then a read-only copy of your Zoom dialogue. And then the third thing you get for that donation is 2 days later, I do a 45-minute integration call, which is actually really important. And there are clients who think, oh, I don't need the integration call. I'm telling you, that integration call is an opportunity for me to take all my notes and highlight what was the most important messages from the other side. And I often get if I'm lucky, I'll get a message in my dreams from the person on the other side. So I'll bring that into the integration call and say, this is what's really important. Really important. Don't let it get lost in the details. These are the highlights, which is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. You are so gifted. Yeah, you really are, because as you explained at the beginning, is that you have a plethora of gifts that are available to us. I think there are either 10 or 12. I'm not quite sure. I was in a call where the lady was very knowledgeable, and when she started talking about the individual ones, I was like, oh my gosh, I have that. Oh my gosh, I have that. So I started ticking off what I had. And so you're very gifted. You're so genuine and lovely and loving that whoever is in your company is going to benefit from the gifts that you have to help them with their lives. And a lot of people really do search because it's hard for us to know what direction and to take in life, because a lot of times we have not allowed and been open enough to actually listen to our own spirit, that we need help with that,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, that's where you are. That's what you're able to do for people, is to help them. And as you help them, they can then learn to attune a little bit more with their body. So you do feel that in any way?
Well, Rhonda, you're very generous. Thank you so much for the sweetness that you just showered me with. I really appreciate it. Your words mean a lot to me. Um, the last part, I guess I agree with you that we can't and weren't meant to do this life alone. And when I was going through that shamanic illness, I needed a lot of support. And I'm also very clear on the distinction between allowing or asking for people around us in our lives to help us and reflect for us, which is such a gift. To have people we know tell us who we are is an amazing present. But I also know that we're all our own healers and teachers. And I actually don't believe that any of us have buried our truth so deep that it's not accessible. And even when I think about, you know, I hate to say this because he's probably a catch-all for this kind of conversation, but Hitler, when I think about the inhumane acts and the devastating destruction and terror that he caused humanity. At any given moment, we can choose to be honest with ourselves. And so, whether your soul is way far on this end of the spectrum, like Hitler's, full of delusion, or if you're just working through a lot of depression and shame and maybe some anger, everybody has free will. And at any given moment, the way out is to be honest with ourselves. And I feel like maybe my role as a medium certainly isn't to give anybody anything they don't already have. Because if you spend time actually learning, you'll find out that the people say that you love and miss the most are actually sitting next to you all the time. They're literally right there. So it's less about me giving something to somebody and more about me being a cheerleader for our own inner wisdom.
That's well said.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Because we all do have that inner wisdom. It's connected to our soul or our spirit, however people want to identify with that. And it's in the waking up that we become more intimate with our soul and our spirit. And I believe it helps direct us on our journey and helps us with our path. And yes, our lives have been difficult. Everybody's lives have been difficult. We don't get through this life unscathed, but it's in those challenges that we become who we are today. And although we can't see it at the time, we never can. When it's only in our reflection that we realize how far we've really come. So I thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest and sharing so much information and knowledge and about your journey, which has been difficult. And it's a hard thing to do. And so I respect you. And I think that you're a gift to humanity because you come from a place of wanting to help others. And I love that.
Oh, thanks, Rhonda. So sweet. You have a gift with words. Thank you so much for that love. I'm letting it all right into my heart.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for your patient listening and for your sharing. I see you as so wise. You really have so much wisdom. And I love how you chose this life to play in real estate as a way to evolve your soul, build things as a way to evolve your soul, which is super cool. It's like I love seeing women in male dominated industries rock it. It's super cool. Yeah. So, and thank you mostly for creating this container and both of your podcasts for bridging that gap between maybe people who can look at your resume and your accomplishments and the way you present yourself in this world as in a very powerful businesswoman, entrepreneurial role, who has no qualms with the spiritual world. It's like you make it inviting for us left brainers, accomplished overachievers to make space for spirituality and to give a platform for people to share their wisdom is, I think, how humanity is going to continue to awaken and really reach the potential of our species. It's really spaces like this. So thank you so much.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and being part of the journey with Nature of Consciousness, your host, Rhonda Grant. Theme song is composed and performed by John Park Wheeler.